It was supposed to be just another lighthearted appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. But what unfolded on that stage left millions of viewers stunned and the internet in absolute chaos because Zendaya, America's beloved star and the face of the hit series Euphoria, didn't just clash with the host. She walked off the set mid-interview in what fans are now calling one of the most shocking live moments in talk show history. The tension began to simmer as the discussion turned to Euphoria's controversial storyline, but no one could have predicted the emotional eruption that followed, with Zendaya visibly upset and Jimmy struggling to regain control of the segment. What really happened that night? What did Jimmy say that pushed Zendaya to the edge, and why has this moment sparked a wildfire of opinions across social media? In this story, we dive deep into the drama that unfolded under the bright studio lights and explore the conversation that ignited a firestorm of controversy and ended with Zendaya storming off the stage in front of a live audience. The energy inside the studio was electric as the audience clapped and cheered while Zendaya stepped onto the Tonight Show stage wearing a sleek dark ensemble. Her confidence radiant as always, the fans erupted with excitement, the cameras rolled, and Jimmy Fallon welcomed her with his signature grin. Both stars exchanged light banter, at first laughing over inside jokes and stories from red carpet moments. But there was a subtle undertone in the air, something that didn't feel quite right. Zendaya smiled, but her eyes seemed cautious, perhaps already anticipating that the night might take a different turn. As they sat down, the conversation quickly moved to the upcoming season of Euphoria. Jimmy leaned forward with a playful smirk and said something like, "So Zendaya, this next season of Euphoria is getting even more intense, huh? I mean, how do you keep a straight face while filming those outrageous scenes?" The audience laughed, but Zendaya didn't. Her posture stiffened just slightly, and for a brief second, the room felt colder. She nodded slowly and replied, "Well, it's not always funny, Jimmy. It's intense because it's real, because a lot of people watching see themselves in these characters, and we try to respect that." Jimmy chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, you can't tell me you didn't laugh filming that one scene with the bathtub, right?" Zendaya looked at him blankly, her expression serious. "That scene was about addiction, Jimmy. It wasn't meant to be funny at all." Jimmy's smile faltered and the audience started shifting in their seats, sensing the change in atmosphere. The tension was now thick and undeniable. Zendaya took a deep breath and said, "We don't shoot these scenes for entertainment. We do it to reflect the real pain people are going through." Jimmy tried to recover, stumbling over his words. Okay, I get it. I didn't mean any offense. I'm just saying it's a wild show, that's all." Zendaya interrupted with a calm but firm tone. "Wild doesn't mean it's a joke, Jimmy, and calling it outrageous kind of misses the point of what we're trying to do." The silence in the studio was now deafening. The laughter had stopped, the applause had faded, and what remained was a raw, emotional exchange unfolding live. Jimmy looked at his cue cards, unsure whether to continue or change the subject, but Zendaya wasn't done yet. She leaned forward, her voice quiet but resolute. "You know, every time someone calls Euphoria shocking or exaggerated, it makes me wonder if people are even listening to the stories we're telling." Jimmy rubbed the back of his neck, clearly realizing he had underestimated the weight of the topic. Trying to laugh it off, he said, all right, I walked into that one. Maybe I need to binge it again with tissues and therapy, huh?" The audience gave a few awkward laughs, but Zendaya didn't even crack a smile. She looked straight into the camera, then back at Jimmy and said, "I'm not here to play along with jokes that reduce real trauma to sound bites and memes." And with that she stood up slowly. The room went completely still as everyone watched her walk toward the backstage curtain. The camera tried to follow, but the angle shifted suddenly and the director cut to a wide shot. Jimmy called out, "Zendaya, wait, come on, let's talk about this." But she was already gone. The applause sign didn't light up, the band didn't play, and for the first time in years, The Tonight Show had an unscripted moment that no one knew how to handle. Backstage murmurs erupted, producers scrambled, the audience sat in disbelief, and Jimmy just stared at the empty chair next to him, wondering how a simple question turned into a walkout that the entire world would be talking about by morning. The moment Zendaya disappeared behind the velvet curtain, the studio was suspended in a surreal silence. Jimmy Fallon sat frozen, his hands still half raised in the air as if reaching for an apology that never came. The audience didn't know whether to clap or hold their breath. The band looked around confused, waiting for a cue that never arrived, and the teleprompter stood blank, like even the technology refused to move forward after what just happened. Producers rushed toward Jimmy's desk, earpieces buzzing with frantic voices trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or salvage what was left of the segment, but Jimmy waved them off, still stunned and clearly thrown off script. He leaned into the camera with a sheepish half smile and said, "Well folks, that was unexpected, but live TV is live for a reason, right?" The nervous laughter that followed from the audience didn't feel like laughter, it felt like disbelief backstage. Zendaya walked quickly, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, her jaw tight, her breathing shallow. She brushed past assistants and security, barely making eye contact until she found a quiet room at the end of the hallway, slamming the door behind her. The noise of the studio faded into nothing. She stood, alone, eyes burning with frustration, not just at Jimmy but at what the moment represented, a reminder that even after years of work, even after critical acclaim and global recognition, her stories, her roles, her voice could still be misunderstood, minimized, turned into jokes for easy applause. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through missed calls, texts, pings from her manager, but ignored them all. She just sat on the small couch staring at the wall, the adrenaline slowly giving way to an ache in her chest. Meanwhile, on stage, Jimmy tried to pivot, calling for the next guest, but the rhythm of the show was shattered. The staff scrambled to rearrange the segment, but the viewers had already seen too much by the time the episode aired. The clip was already viral. Fans and critics alike began dissecting the exchange frame by frame. The internet exploded with reactions. Some praised Zendaya for standing her ground, calling her brave and powerful, while others questioned whether walking out was the right move. Headlines flooded social media: Zendaya shuts down Fallon, Zendaya walks off live TV, Zendaya demands respect for Euphoria. And what began as a routine promotional appearance turned into a national conversation about trauma, representation, and media responsibility. Back in her dressing room, Zendaya's publicist finally knocked gently on the door and stepped inside, her voice low and careful. "Are you okay?" Zendaya nodded slowly, her voice quiet. "I'm just tired of having to explain the same thing over and over. It's like they watch the show but they don't really see it." Her publicist sat beside her, offering a bottle of water. "You know, this is going to be everywhere by tomorrow, right?" Zendaya gave a dry laugh. "It's already everywhere." She showed her phone, trending #1 worldwide. The clip had already racked up millions of views in minutes. Fans were posting support, industry voices chiming in, and the Euphoria cast tweeting hearts and praise. The publicist looked at her seriously. "Do you want to release a statement?" Zendaya thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, let the moment speak for itself." Later that night, Jimmy released a short clip from his office, recorded on a phone, his expression sincere and clearly shaken. "I just want to say, I have immense respect for Zendaya and the work she does. Euphoria tells stories that are important, and I didn't handle that conversation the way I should have. I'm sorry for that." The video got mixed reactions. Some appreciated the honesty, others called it damage control, but Zendaya didn't respond. She didn't post or tweet or comment. Instead, she let the moment echo through the culture, let people feel the discomfort, the silence, the weight of her walkout, because sometimes saying nothing says more than any tweet ever could. And as the hours passed, it became clear this was more than a celebrity moment. It was a mirror held up to how the world listens, how it jokes, how it forgets, and how one woman decided she wouldn't let her voice be reduced to a punchline, not anymore. The following morning, the world woke up to chaos as every news outlet, from entertainment blogs to mainstream headlines, led with the same explosive footage. Zendaya walking off The Tonight Show, set her eyes burning, her voice calm yet unmistakably fierce. The clip had spread like wildfire from YouTube to TikTok to Twitter. Fans were stitching reactions, critics were writing think pieces, and media analysts were debating the deeper meaning behind her decision to leave mid-interview. It wasn't just about a talk show moment anymore. It had transformed into a symbol, a stand, a ripple that was now shaking the shallow waters of Hollywood PR perfection. Zendaya stayed silent through the storm. No tweets, no interviews, no explanation. She attended her scheduled events later that week with her usual grace, but there was something different about her now, a firmer edge to her presence, a quiet storm behind her eyes. Photographers tried to shout questions at red carpets, desperate to get a quote, but she didn't stop, she didn't smile, she simply walked with purpose, cameras flashing around her like lightning in a thundercloud, while behind-the-scenes studios were suddenly re-evaluating their entire PR playbooks. At HBO, executives held emergency meetings, wondering if they should respond, issue statements, or defend the network's star. But the show's creator, Sam Levinson, released a simple message on Instagram: "Proud of Zendaya, always honest, always fearless." No hashtags, no brand speak, just a few words that carried the weight of solidarity. The cast followed suit. Hunter Schafer, Jacob Elordi, and others posted photos with Zendaya, captioned only with hearts or silent support. No one mentioned Jimmy Fallon, no one had to. Meanwhile, at NBC, the fallout continued. Producers debated whether to air the full uncut segment or trim the exchange to save face. Eventually, they decided to release the clip in full transparency, hoping the audience would appreciate the honesty, but the internet had already decided this was not something that could be swept under a rug. Clips of the moment were being remixed, scored with dramatic music, or posted with captions like "This is why Zendaya is a queen and she didn't walk out, she walked all backstage." Crew members who were present during the moment began sharing anonymous insights, with blogs saying the tension had been building even before filming started. Some noticed that Zendaya seemed guarded in the green room. Others said Jimmy looked unusually edgy that night, trying too hard to be funny, perhaps even nervous. And though none of these whispers could be fully verified, they added to the mystique of the moment, painting it as the perfect storm of misunderstanding, emotional fatigue, and raw. Honestly, later that week, Zendaya finally broke her silence, but not through an interview or press conference. Instead, she sat down with a high school journalism class during a surprise visit, something she had promised to do months ago. And when one of the students shyly asked her about the walkout, she smiled gently and said, "Sometimes, when you're trying to protect something sacred, you have to walk away from what feels safe in order to stay true to it." The classroom went quiet. Her words weren't rehearsed or dramatic, just real, and that's why they hit harder than any televised apology ever could. Jimmy Fallon, on the other hand, continued with his nightly show, but the atmosphere had changed. Even regular viewers noticed a shift, a hesitation in his interviews, a certain caution, as if he now carried a ghost with him, a reminder that not every guest is there for laughs, not every conversation can be spun into comedy. And though he tried to move on, his next few episodes were met with awkward jokes and stiff transitions, the shadow of the Zendaya moment still looming over his desk in the broader cultural conversation. Zendaya's walkout sparked renewed discussions about the role of media in handling sensitive content. Activists applauded her for challenging the entertainment machine, while young actors found a new kind of role model in her, someone who wasn't afraid to say enough, someone who valued truth over applause. And though some critics argued she overreacted, the overwhelming tide of support drowned out the noise, reminding everyone that silence doesn't mean submission and that sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you condoned. As the week closed, what had started as an awkward interview bloomed into something much more: a cultural reset, a conversation starter, a moment of truth caught on camera that no one could ignore anymore. And in that truth, Zendaya stood taller than ever, not just as an actress, not just as a star, but as a voice that refused to be dimmed. By the end of the week, the storm had evolved into something deeper, not just a trending moment or viral video, but a reckoning, a moment that made late-night hosts, producers, and even fans question the tone of celebrity interviews, the boundaries between humor and disrespect, and the importance of understanding the stories we consume across social media. People weren't just reacting, they were reflecting. Celebrities started sharing their own stories of interviews that crossed lines. Of times they laughed off offensive questions just to keep the show moving. And suddenly, Zendaya's decision to walk off didn't look like a diva move, it looked like bravery in real time. Inside Hollywood, things began to shift quietly but noticeably. Casting agents, PR teams, and talk show staff started getting sensitivity refreshers. Networks held emergency meetings about guest treatment and studio protocols. Publicists now pushed for pre-approved topics with more intensity than ever before, and it was all because one woman chose not to smile through a moment that felt wrong, and that choice echoed louder than any press tours ever could. Meanwhile, Zendaya returned to work on the Euphoria set. The cast welcomed her back with silent hugs, knowing that she had just gone through a storm of scrutiny and come out stronger than ever. The energy on set was different, more protective, more united. They weren't just actors anymore, they were advocates of the pain they portrayed. Their scripts now felt heavier, more sacred. The crew moved with a deeper kind of respect for the work they were doing, and Zendaya stepped back into her role with fire in her veins, more connected to her character than ever before, because now the world had seen a glimpse of the same misunderstanding her character often faced, the kind that comes when people laugh at your truth instead of listening to it. At the same time, Jimmy Fallon began reaching out behind the scenes. He wanted to speak to Zendaya, not publicly, not for ratings, but privately, to apologize, to understand her side, to move forward with clarity. He sent a message through her team asking if she'd be open to a call. No cameras, no audience, no pressure. Zendaya took her time, responding not out of spite, but because she knew the importance of silence. Sometimes healing needs time, not just words. A week later, the two finally spoke, their voices calm and honest. The call wasn't scripted, it wasn't easy, but it was real. Jimmy admitted he missed the mark that night, that he was trying too hard to be funny and ended up being careless. Zendaya didn't sugarcoat her response. She told him exactly how it felt to have her work reduced to jokes, to have trauma turned into comedy fodder, but she also said she appreciated the effort to understand too. listened to grow. They didn't agree on everything, but they found common ground in something deeper: respect. Shortly after their call, a joint statement was released. Short and clear: we had a conversation. It was honest. It was necessary. We moved forward with respect. And while some viewers still wanted drama, still hoped for another viral moment, what they got instead was maturity and grace from two people who chose to learn instead of fight. And the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, Zendaya was invited to speak at panels about mental health and media. She began shaping conversations about how young actors are often expected to entertain, while carrying stories that demand empathy, not mockery. She didn't become bitter, she became bolder, and the industry began to shift with her. Writers started taking notes, producers became more careful, and talk shows quietly adjusted their tones, not out of fear but out of newfound respect for the artists sitting in those chairs. For her fans, Zendaya became something more than a star. She became a symbol of self-respect, of boundary, the setting of knowing when to speak and when to walk away. And as her next interviews aired, fans noticed the difference in how she was treated, how the questions were framed, how the space around her seemed more thoughtful. And maybe, just maybe, that walkout wasn't a breakdown but a breakthrough, and everyone watching knew they had witnessed something rare: not just entertainment, not just drama, but real growth played out in front of a live audience and the entire world. Weeks turned into months, and the memory of that night on The Tonight Show still lingered in the corners of pop culture, not as a scandal, not as a career stain, but as a defining moment, a realignment of what the audience expects from celebrity interviews, and what stars deserve when they walk onto a stage to share their truth. Zendaya never milked the moment. She never posted long rants or sat down for dramatic exposure. She let her actions speak louder than the internet ever could, and that choice, that made her even more powerful in the eyes of fans and critics alike. Her next red carpet appearance was nothing short of iconic. She walked in calm, composed, radiant as ever, cameras clicking furiously, not to capture gossip but to admire her grace. As reporters called out questions hoping for a soundbite about the Fallon incident, she simply smiled and said, "I think we've all learned something since then," and walked on. Her presence said everything, more than any press release ever could, because in a world hungry for chaos, Zendaya had offered clarity, and in doing so elevated herself beyond celebrity into something rare. Authenticity. Jimmy Fallon too changed, not overnight and not in ways that drew applause, but subtly, in the tone of his interviews, in the way he paused and listened, in how he allowed guests to speak without turning every sentence into a punchline. His humor remained, but it was gentler, more aware. His audience noticed, his critics softened, and those who had once mocked the moment began to understand its weight, not because he was cancelled, but because he was challenged, and he chose to grow behind closed doors. In Hollywood, Zendaya's walkout became case study material. PR teams began using it as a learning model for client preparation. Producers updated guidelines on how to approach sensitive content, and talk show hosts from major networks held workshops on tone awareness, empathy, and the balance between entertainment and respect. And for the first time in a long time, the machine paused to think, to recalibrate, to question whether chasing viral laughs was worth more than offering a safe and sincere platform. Euphoria's next season was released to record breaking viewership, but more importantly, to deeper engagement. Fans watched the show with more awareness, more reflection. The scenes hit harder, the performances resonated louder, and when Zendaya's character faced pain or confrontation, the audience didn't just watch, they understood, because they had seen the actress behind the role demand that same understanding in real life. The lines between fiction and reality blurred, not in confusion but in connection, and that made all the difference. Later, in an in-depth magazine profile, Zendaya finally opened up just a little. She said that walking off that stage wasn't about drama or ego, but about drawing a line, not for the cameras but for herself, because sometimes the only way to hold space for truth is to remove yourself from where it's not being honored. She didn't cry, she didn't rant, she spoke like someone who had faced the fire and come out wiser, calmer, and more certain of her worth. And that's what stuck with people long after the hashtags faded, long after the algorithms moved on. The image of her walking off, not in rage but in quiet refusal to be minimized, stayed in the hearts of fans. It reminded young people, especially women, especially artists, that they had the right to say no, the right to set boundaries, the right to demand depth in a world addicted to surface-level love. Jimmy would later joke in an interview that she taught him more in that 5 minutes than any media training ever did, and while people laughed, they knew he meant it, because the best lessons don't always come with applause. They come with silence, with reflection, with a moment you realize you missed the mark and decide never to miss it again. In the end, it wasn't about a walkout, it was about a wake-up call. It was about a young woman who turned discomfort into dialogue, who turned tension into transformation, and who reminded the world that respect isn't optional even under studio lights and applause signs, because when Zendaya walked, why, she wasn't walking away from the spotlight. She was walking into her power, and the world followed with quiet awe and open eyes. And so what began as just another late-night appearance turned into a moment that echoed far beyond the studio. While Zendaya's quiet walkout spoke louder than any headline, any viral tweet or trending hashtag, it became a symbol of strength, a reminder that even in the spotlight, your voice, your boundaries, your truth matter more than applause. She didn't storm off for drama, she walked off for dignity, and in doing so she sparked a conversation that made everyone stop and listen, from Hollywood stages to living rooms around the world. So whether you saw it live or heard about it after, one thing is certain: this wasn't just television, this was transformation. Thanks for watching, and if this story moved you, share it. Let it be a reminder that silence can be powerful, that standing up sometimes means walking out, and that authenticity will always shine brighter than any stage light.